Very good morning to you and welcome to Morning Express. My name is Trix Ingado. Today on the show, we take a look at the very latest that is making headlines both locally and internationally. We shall kick this off with press review and later on dig deeper into other news that are making headlines. Welcome.
Of course, a very good morning to you back at home. My name is Jesse Rogers, and as always, we'll definitely bring you up to speed with the latest developments. Barely 48 hours to the by-election slated for Kiambaa and Mogoga Ward. Will definitely focus on what to expect. The stakes are high between President Uhuru Kenyatta's Jubilee Party and UDA of Deputy President Dr. William Ruto. Who will carry the day? Many tout it as a litmus test. What does this mean this close to the 2022 general election? We'll definitely delve deeper into the latest political intrigues in the country. Stay tuned.
Indeed. And also let's take a look at what's making headlines across borders. And we're starting off as usual with the Pearl of Africa. That is Uganda. One ICU bed for 188,000 Ugandans. Health administrators say an increase in COVID-19 admissions put a strain on the available bed capacity in the country. Also worry as hackers target driving permit company. Company official says police have made several arrests in connection with that matter. Cybercrime is also making headlines on the Daily Monitor. Also being told about low sugarcane prices push Busonga farmers towards the cliff, and floods have displaced 400 people, set to submerge a district according to district officers. And also we are also told about suspected voyeur arrested in Iganga. The suspect says he embraced the bizarre habit to boost his waning libido. Find out how this man was caught on the wrong side of the law. Also we are told about 6 dead as Zuma protests intensify. Find out what's happening in that part of the continent. To the south, of course, Jacob Zuma had quite passionate supporters who made it to the streets after his arrest, and clearly things did not go well for some of them. And we're also told about what's happening in the UK. UK agonizes after racial abuse of English football stars. Those young men who were actually on the receiving end of a array of racial slurs and insults online after the team lost. Find out more about what's happening on that end. And also you're told about what's happening in South Africa. SA deploys army as pro-Zuma protests spiral. The epicenter of the unrest in Zuma's home region, the southeastern province of KwaZulu-Natal. Also in Rwanda, South Africa set to team up to restore relations, and Kenya passport holders banned in 54 countries. Find out what that is about by taking a look at the East African. Let's move on to the next paper and see what's making headlines. Having Rwanda today this morning telling us a virus disruption leaves maize farmers with dead stock. Now, it is estimated that farmers are stuck with not less than 30 tons of maize in their stores as a result of a lack of markets. And of course, pictured there, some of the spoiled harvests. Also, COVAX to receive 110 million Chinese COVID vaccines doses. Find out more about that. We're being told that as of July 12th, COVAX has distributed over 102 million doses to 135 countries, far fewer than the goal when this started at the start of the year. Also, the Rwanda-South African relations also making headlines in Rwanda today, and South Africa's top court to review Zuma's jail term. This is the wake of those widespread protests, with the epicenter being in KwaZulu-Natal. Also, we're told Kenyan passport holders banned in 54 countries. Find out why by taking a look at the Rwanda today as well as the East African. Let's take a look at the Citizen. This is from Tanzania. We're told the story behind the iconic Kariokor market. On Saturday night, July 10th, an inferno erupted in the iconic Kariokor market incident. It was on the same date, incidentally rather, that the architect of this building, Beda Amuli, died 5 years ago. Find out that the reason behind that bizarre connection. Also, Nectar releases 2021 Form 6 results. Government schools outshine private schools. Also, Magawa trainer dies amid rat-use trails in fight against COVID-19. You can see him right there pictured with that particular rat on his shoulder. We also told the top 10 schools Form 6 results for 2021, and NIT set to become training center for Airbus Boeing in Africa. Let's move on and see what's making headlines on the international front. On the world page of the CNN, cafe near the Taj Mahal that empowered acid attack survivors has closed, but these sheroes aren't done. And as you can see right there, they are pictured there, the victims of acid attacks that were working in that cafe. Of course, a very brave effort they were putting there. Find out how they're going to be moving forward after that cafe was closed. Around the world, Europe, scuffles break out in Georgia's parliament over cameraman's death following anti-LGBTQ demonstrations. We also told about what's happening in the Middle East. Dubai port rocked by huge explosion on a container ship. This happened a few days ago. These age-defying roses can last for years and the cost up to $80,000. And in Lebanon Lebanon is days away from a social explosion, according to the Prime Minister of that country. Also in Africa, we told about what's happening with the Zuma protests. We are having more happening from the Americas, or more being reported from the Americas. We are being told several tied to Haiti assassination plot were previously U.S. law enforcement informants. And Cubans take to the streets in rare protest over lack of freedoms and worsening economy. We are also told here at least 11 killed in lightning strike near the tourist spots a tourist spot in India, and Twitter is a mess in India. Here's how it got there. Find out more by taking a look at the CNN and all the other papers we have, covered right here in the beginning of Press Review. But let's take a look at what's happening in the local papers. And joining me is legislator James Gakuya to take a look at what's making headlines locally. We have the Daily Nation this morning and the Standard. We're going to start closer to home with the Standard. We're being told CJ Kome fires a warning shot. The honeymoon is over. This is what we're being told this morning. Chief Justice puts both houses of Parliament on notice in a letter detailing multiple and overlapping summons to judicial staff that she says borders on harassment and disrespect of the constitutional boundaries, and holds appearances until the matter is resolved. Honorable Gakuya, welcome to the show this morning. What do you make of this?
Thank you, Trix. My view on the matters appearing on our daily papers, on matters to do with the staff warning by the new Chief Justice, in the matters to do with the relationship between the two organs of government, arms of government. It is very true that where there is a smoke, there is fire.
Yes.
I also believe that even though the Parliament has been given powers by the Constitution and the standing orders to vet, to do, or to interrogate anybody, also there has to be a decorum process where issues to do with overlapping, like the matters explained by Chief Justice, where the registrar, has been invited in a single day in over 3 different meetings. Even though you would like to appear to each and every single meeting, depending on the schedules, it might not be easy and possible. And therefore, a good working program has to be put on place, and elements of harassment should not be seen in any offing situation. And Parliament having enjoying those Parliament powers in committees where they can invite anybody, including executive, I also believe that the committees and the House, both houses, must also consider that the officers that sometimes require to appear in these committees also has other duties to perform, and they also require to participate in their daily jurisdictions and serve. At this particular point in time, I would say, a cordial working relationship between the two arms of government is supposed to be there. And I wish that the two speakers will pronounce themselves in this matter and address it accordingly, so that there can be a program that will not be seen as having any elements of harassment.
Yes, that one can only hope. Now, also joining us via Zoom is Professor Peter Kagwanja, who would like to get in on this conversation. Welcome to the show, Professor. There's a quote here from Chief Justice Martha Koome that says, "We have had frequent and multiple summons from Parliament overlapping and duplicating. Part of it borders on harassment." What is your reaction to this new revelation?
No, it's very, the main challenge we are having now is how to police the separation of powers that is built into the Constitution. And the separation of powers does not mean that the arms of government work in isolation. It means that there must be some coordination, some synergy in what they do. So I would think that it is not a very serious affair in that regard. It's not like things are falling apart. It's a simple warning or a simple alert that our systems need to function. If you revisit our 2010 Constitution, it is the one that introduced this very, very complex principle that the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary must have internal freedom from intervention or interference with each other, but they must at the same time work in tandem if the government is going to function. Therefore, you are likely to find this kind of warning either from Parliament or from judiciary or from the executive. I think the worst situation would be where such kind of alerts are put in a manner like it's an order or it is like you must do it,
yes,
rather than a kind of a call to synergy. In that regard, then I would take judiciary's comment or writing as part of that alert that well, let's be careful that in our working for separation, let's respect the boundaries of the separation of powers. And I think the legislature is going to say, let's also respect each other's territory. That's going to be a permanent feature of the interaction of our governing institutions.
Absolutely. And Professor, when you look at such issues, the CJ has tried to be firm and fair, even when even at the beginning when she was talking about the judges that were not appointed, and it caused a lot of people, a lot of sentiments to come out, some for what had happened, some against. But it seems like such a position would require a lot of diplomacy. Do you think this approach is right, especially given that the paper is putting it this way, saying the honeymoon is over, as the CJ puts the two houses of parliament on notice over multiple summons, harassments and disrespect of the constitutional boundaries? And she's saying that the oversight role of Parliament has to be done within the four corners of the law. But at the same time, given the history of the judiciary and the executive, and now we're having Parliament being roped in, don't you think there's a level of diplomacy that is required?
Thank you very much. I think. Let me also say good morning to Honorable Gakuya of the studio, my good friend. Let me observe that first and foremost, it is that diplomacy which you've talked about which is needed. Now, we have the three arms of government, and it's important to illuminate what kind of powers they have and where they draw their power. Now, our constitution requires that the president is elected by 50% plus one. In other words, and a kind of an absolute majority of the population. Parliament is the organization to which our constitution delegates power, the functioning of power, the oversight power. So the role of Parliament is basically to oversight the entire country, whether you are an individual or whether you are a collective. That is where public participation is such a key feature of parliamentary process.
Right.
Third is judiciary. Judiciary does not draw its power from the people directly. These are hired people, these are professionals with a very specific role of ensuring that the law is protected, that the law is implemented in a manner that is commensurate with the doctrine of the sovereignty of the people. Now, therefore, if you could almost assign some hierarchical power in this regard. The executive is equal to judiciary and parliament, but it is higher because it represents directly the will of the people,
yes,
the sovereign, and that is the beginning of the constitution. Parliament is second, but it also exercises oversight of legislature on specified matters, including budget and budget and other matters that of the spending of finances and issues of corruption and all that. Executive, the judiciary does not draw its power directly from the people. That is why the Chief Justice does not have to seek, an elected position, not an electoral role. A judge cannot be elected by the people. So they don't draw their power direct from the people. If you don't exercise the diplomacy, and in that regard, respect the role of Parliament as an oversight organization or an arm of government, then you're going to have what we call judicial activism. And you cannot have judicial activism on the basis of the Constitution, and the same Constitution is the one that gives power to the executive and Parliament. And therefore, the judiciary need to be extremely careful, otherwise it will take over in a kind of a judicial coup, take over the power of the sovereign, who is Wanjiku, or we, the sovereign, the people of Kenya, express themselves through election when they elect the two arms of government. The executive is elected separately, judiciary parliament is elected separately. The judiciary is not elected. It is appointed by the two arms, by the executive and the government as such. So, in other words, we need absolute diplomacy, particularly from judiciary. Otherwise, judicial activism or assertion of some sovereignty of the judiciary. What is sovereign is the law, because it is about the people, we, the people, the opening, preamble.
yes.
So I think the judiciary need to walk a very tight rope here to ensure that it has its independence. At the same time, it does not carry a judicial coup against the elected arms of government.
Okay, or at least she is calling for Parliament to act within the bounds, or as she put it, the four corners of the law. Honorable Gakwe, do you have something to add to this?
I think what I can just add is that what matters is service to the humanity, and the three arms, its main aim is to make sure that things are riding to the on the right direction, and the public is well served.
True.
Therefore, what the judiciary should pronounce itself into is that it is a service provider to the humanity, the parliament service provider to the humanity, and the executive too is a service provider to humanity, and the three should work in tandem in what we call a cordial relationship, because neither of it can be able to work independently without having been checked by the other. We must also allow that those threshold given by, or those powers given by the Constitution has also to be respected. Because one, you cannot obstruct the Parliament to do its oversight.
Yes.
And the oversight does not stop at any level. It stops at no level because it will oversight the whole executive and judiciary. And therefore, when the judiciary is supposed to respond out of various number, including audit queries, where the PSC comes in. I believe that it is necessary for them to codor on that, because failure to that, then will be seen not respecting the Constitution and not respecting the main sovereignty of Wanjiku. And therefore, my appeal to this is that let us approach this matter in a sobriety, in that all of us we are there to serve the people of Kenya.
Okay. The people, of course, have to be given priority in terms of how everything is handled now and be kept in thought. Now, let's shift gears to the Daily Nation this morning. A very, very interesting approach they're taking with their front page this morning. They're telling us alarm over the rise of child kidnapping. And they have gone into details and told us that 61 is the number of children reported to be missing between March and May this year. Now, in the past few months, there have been growing appeals on social media about missing family members, but that seems to be as far as it goes. More disturbing, however, is that the perpetrators of the abductions, torture and murders have also increasingly been targeting innocent, defenseless children, and they have the numbers to back it up, painting a very grim picture of what is happening right under our noses. What do you make of this, Honorable Gakuya, the fact that there are increasing numbers of children disappearing from their homes or neighborhoods, and of course the perpetrators are among us?
Tricks is a very alarming situation all over the country. Yesterday itself, I have just learned from one of the papers there,
yes,
which has been talking about a kidnap that was happening yesterday around Machakos. And I have just gone through a situation where a 13-year child, which was a girl, was kidnapped through being led to a certain vehicle where she was being asked to be given, to be assisted to be given a lift to a market nearby. But you realize, immediately that they entered into that particular vehicle, it was a saloon car, she also found a number of other children already kidnapped in the vehicle. And on the way, before she, you realize at the market that you were supposed to be dropped, the guys spinned off and they didn't does as required. But ahead there was a boy crossing the road, and as the boy was crossing the road, the driver found another carrot, and there he stopped the vehicle to lure the young boy to the vehicle, and that is how this young girl managed to run out of that vehicle when it stopped for them order to catch another child. Then it is a very big business and a very big scandal going around. And what I would say is that because public gives information, public has a duty to play, to work in tandem with what we call security agencies, so that in fact every single orchestration you can witness wherever you are, you can be able to report it through your cell phone, because these cell phones are very speedy reporters. You can SMS, you can do anything, you can call to make sure that at least we can be able to anything, because failure for us to work as a team, it will be very hard to leave one single organ or a single agency to fight with this particular pandemic. And therefore, it is a duty to every one of us. Make sure that once you witness an issue, which is an issue that is not upcoming, make sure that you report so that at least information is power, and it will be able to assist even the agencies to quickly recoup and try to trace these particular kidnappers. It is a situation which I can say probably there is a big market somewhere, because I can guess that such a kind of number of children kidnapped must be having a market somewhere.
Yeah.
This one, I can say it's not only elements of swindling money from the parents, because one, if you don't know even the background of that particular child, how do you kidnap her? And you don't know whether she's a son or a daughter of a peasant. And therefore, in my thinking, I believe there is a market somewhere to market these kidnapped children.
Absolutely, it is true. They have to be going somewhere for it to fuel the appetite for this crime. Now, we're told most of the incidences go unreported, and police say that they urge parents to monitor social media. One family in Zimmerman estate has been living in agony after their 14-year-old boy who went out to get a haircut disappeared without a trace. On page 7 of the Daily Nation as well, we're having the picture of a 3-year-old Franklin Gisheru who disappeared, or rather went missing on June the 22nd. On Professor Kagwanja, what do you make of this? It's pretty unfortunate that this is something that is increasing as we, at the same time, at a time where we're going through a pandemic, we're having children coming for midterms. I mean, there's so many elements that I would say are feeding into this criminal activity.
Yeah, well, it is true. We are going to experience rising waves of criminality, both within countries and transnationally. It is going to happen because COVID-19 has had serious socioeconomic impact, including intensifying unemployment. The levels of poverty have increased more than ever before. And we're also going to find that the methods used for survival are going to be very, very brutal. Obviously, kidnapping has several effects. One, either these people are participating for human trafficking across boundaries of countries. So when kids disappear, they are either as victims of human trafficking. They are moved outside the country for this or that purpose. Women, for example, or girls, for example, are taken abroad for prostitution, which is one of the markets. The other market, which is rather cruel market, is the organs, meaning people are really murdered for the purpose of the sale of organs, that are vital. That's why we're looking for young people and so on. Seen a lot of this in the Sinai Peninsula of Egypt, where African and Asian kids or young people are transported for that particular purpose. God forbid that is what is happening in Kenyans, but we need to investigate whether that is happening. We need a lot of cameras in our neighborhoods, a lot of light.
Yeah.
We need a lot of police patrols. We also need people to be vigilant. You as a citizen, you have responsibility to look after each other. We are all our brothers and our sisters keepers. And therefore, we need to have a very complex way of protecting our citizens. And until we do that, we are not going to be safe. On the seas, we have had piracy, where we have pirates, hijacking ships and so on. And what do they want? They want money. What do they do? If they don't get the money, they kill the victims. In this country, we've seen the abduction of the Cuban doctors in the northern part of the country, where they are abducted, and the country or the government or the people concerned ask for ransom. So we must be careful about the complex nature of this type of crime that we are witnessing. And we all need to be vigilant, whether it's arms of government or the citizen himself or herself.
Okay, and of course, in what seems to be a running theme, the Standard this morning has a special report between page 5 and 7 that is going on about teenagers and the things that they're facing. Now, on page 5, we're told your teenage child may have had a lot of sex during lockdown, and this is being backed up by numbers that have been released in a report. Sobering statistics indicate that urgent need for bold corrective action to prevent this cohort from becoming a lost generation. 2% of 5 to 19-year-olds were married when schools reopened following the extended school closure in 2020. On page 6, we are told team proposes plan to support pregnant girls to complete their studies. We're also being told on page 6, remote learning exposes countries' digital divide. That also has to do with teenagers and kids in school. 50% adolescents battle mental disorders. Then we are having more than 400,000 did not return to school. Those are also children. And we're also told about more issues surrounding teenagers and children, in school-going children, that is. Job losses exposed teens to hunger, unable to seek medical services. So much going on with the children that is not very positive. Honorable Gakuya, what's your reaction to some of these things? And perhaps where does the solution lie? Is it in legislation? What interventions can be made to deal with some of these issues?
Let me say that we have very fragile generation of youth. This particular pandemic has come in a very untimely time, and the seriously affected generation is the youth. You realize that during that small time or window of the school closure under the pressure of COVID restrictions, over 100,000 girls got married. Those are early marriages, and that are very premature to me. The other take is that most of the other team moved to what we call labor works. And it tells you how desperate our youths are. And where do we started going wrong? This pandemic aside, doesn't us as a parents have a role to play to make sure that our young ones are safe and well protected? Yes, because one, I believe it is not only the power of the teacher who should be a disciplinary in this particular field of young generation.
Yes.
I believe parents have their role to discipline their children, and they have to make sure that they guard their children. If you fail to guard your children, protect your children, whom else do you expect to do so better than you? You just want to leave your children, just walk out and just behave in a haphazard manner outside there, and still believe that you have a generation you are nurturing. Then the biggest question is, where is the parent in the first place? Because when our students are in class, I am sure that we are guaranteed of a very safety net. But find a situation only when these children were under the parent outside there for about a duration of 7 months, and the August situation we have encountered. This tells you parents have slept and has left their job to nurture their children to somebody else. And what I would need to urge them now is to take their role, take their mantle, make sure the children belongs to you. You are the father, you are the mother of that particular young one. If you fail to take your mantle, then you are leaving it to the society, and the society have no mercy. Yes.
Clearly.
Yes.
We're told, Professor Kagwanja, we're told more than 400 did not return to school. They also told job losses exposed teenagers to hunger, and some of them are unable to afford or seek medical services. 50% of adolescents are struggling with mental disorders. Remote learning is exposing digital divide. A team has proposed support for pregnant girls to complete their education, indicating that many of them have fallen by the wayside after getting pregnant. And on page 5, your teenage child may have had a lot of sex during lockdown. What do you make of this?
Well, I wouldn't really focus on sex alone. I think sometimes we just speak sensational. If it was sex alone for children under 18, you would say, well, this is within the law. These are grown-ups according to our law. But there is a deeper problem here, which sex and so on are just simple manifestations or the tips of the iceberg. You talked very well at the beginning when you were speaking to Honorable Gakuya that we face a threat of a lost generation. And you remember we have already lost several generations to a number of issues. In the 1980s and 1990s, we lost generations to ethnic clashes in parts of the country. Obviously, we have lost generation to COVID-19, which has brought a lot of misery in the country because of losses of jobs and so on. And as a result, some of the people have adopted coping strategies, and some of the coping strategies are actually teenage prostitution. We've seen a lot of it beginning to take place in our cities and even in our rural markets. Sex as a way of making ends meet. Now, what is happening is that we are beginning to see families that are beginning to become dependent of already poor families. Right. In other words, child marriages. Because when you marry at 16 or at 18, you are not able to sustain yourself. You're not actually ready for marriage. Therefore, this is going to bring more poverty, deepening poverty in our area, and also far out from schools, as you have mentioned. mental diseases. What are we saying? We are losing our war on the three enemies of the people that were pronounced at independence. That is poverty, ignorance, and disease. And therefore, we are back to where we started at independence 57 years ago, which is a very, very sad situation. What do we need to do? Quickly. One, we need to begin positioning families as solutions to some of our social problems.
Okay.
We need to alert the faith-based organizations, churches, mosques, and so on, to take their responsibility to assert the morality in our societies. Civil society organizations need to refocus attention not only into development and political rights and human rights, but now to the fact that we need to counsel our children, and teachers should not forsake their role just because we are now going on online classes. You still have the responsibility to deepen and strengthen institutions for counseling within our education institutions.
Yes.
So we have solutions here. It is a question of adjusting ourselves to the new challenges that we find our children are in. And if we don't save our children, if we don't save the child, we are watching our country die. Honorable Kakuya is familiar with the Kikuyu saying that if you have a herd that has no calves, we are all gone. So we must care and look after our calves so that we can have the community of the future.
Absolutely, but I would like you to also focus, you talked about counseling, the issue of mental disorders, quite grim when you look at that figure that we're being given, 50%. Isn't there more that we can do? Because some of these issues require real medical attention that is far from counseling or morality. It is even starts from the point of a parent or a guardian or teachers at school recognizing there is a medical issue here that has to do with their mental wellness. So what do you think can be done more proactively to ensure that these kids get the much needed attention, medical attention that they need?
Now, with the issues of medical problems or diseases, mental diseases in their various degrees, obviously there are some that will require hospitalization in specialized institutions. Obviously, there are others that are very expensive. Now, we are talking about costs on costs. Remember, COVID-19 has completely dilapidated and destroyed our institutions, our families, our societies because of poverty. We need serious government intervention in some of these areas. Right. Remember also, something that we have not mentioned or may not have been considered within the purview of that research, which is drug addiction. The rates of young people going into drugs, again, complicating the problem of mental diseases and also, the alertness of the young ones. Yeah. So what we need basically are that the government needs to invest more heavily in terms of the social welfare issues, like basically expanding facilities for mental health. We cannot ignore counseling, but because apart from mental health, apart from the medical necessities that may be there, these kids need to feel that they're part of a community. Mental diseases are largely because of isolation, that you are used to working within communities, and then all of a sudden you find yourself in the house, you don't have data bundles, you even don't have a phone that has internet, and so on. So the kid begin to become isolated and therefore falling into mental diseases. Right. We need to encourage communities. We used to have the not national service, but Scout movement. Yes, yes. We need to expand our community now. The Scout movement, Scout guides. We need to expand debating within communities so that people interact, because that's what deal with the medical situation on a more permanent basis. Absolutely. But isolation, and you find this in northern countries, Scandinavian countries, Norway, Sweden, and Denmark, where because people stay indoors for so long that they begin really losing their focus. So again, we need to adjust our society to the reality we find ourselves in after the COVID-19 pandemic struck.
Absolutely, and it reminds me of the youth centers that the Catholic Church used to have a few years back. I'm not sure if they're still available, but some of those programs were actually very good for young people. The report says many adolescents were introduced to drugs and alcohol while that emboldened them to engage in some of these activities. Grab yourself a copy of the Standard newspaper. Take a look at this special report between pages 5 and 7 and find out what's plaguing young people. Actually, they're basically children. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, we'll be taking a look at some of the stories that are making headlines, some of them quite grim. We're told on the front page of the Daily Nation, the chilling account of Sharon's brutal murder. And of course, that is the case that is involving Migori Governor Okoth Obado. This is also making the front page of the Standard this morning. Sharon's painful death revealed is what they're telling us this morning. Let's take a break. We'll be back with more for you here on Morning Express.